Live from our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., it is Monday, the 24th of February, the year of our Lord 2020, episode 23 of War Room Pandemic. This virus is a demon, and we cannot allow this demon to hide, so says President Xi. One of the reasons why we've done this show now for, 4 or 5 weeks is the simple fact we're trying to get full information, that information that is out there, to the American people and the people of the world. As we try to understand what this pandemic is. Remember, 23 episodes ago, back in January, we called this a pandemic at the time because it was a pandemic then, and it's more of a global pandemic now. We're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network, on Salem Broadcast throughout the nation, on americasvoice.news, America's Voice being the great streaming platform of the Trump movement in this country. Also, FM 91.1 and 99.1 in Chicago, and FM 103.9 in the Chicago suburbs, joined by Jack Maxey, who runs the engine room of the War Room and all things pandemic. Curtis Ellis from America First Policy, which is really the PAC, that's the policy arm of the Trump movement, and one of the top economists around there about economic nationalism and knows everything about China. We're now joined by Professor Christopher Balding, and Professor Balding is at Fulbright University in Saigon. He's one of the top experts on the Chinese economy. And because we know that trading floors throughout the world listen into pandemic, what we'd like to do is get down to the nitty-gritty, get down to the details. Later in the show, we're going to have actually Dave Bratt, another economist, former congressman from Virginia 7, now head of the business school at Liberty University. He's going to be joining us. We're also going to have live reports from throughout the world, including Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins is going to be calling directly from Italy to talk to us about what's going on in Italy. But I want to start with Professor Balding. Do we have you, Professor?
Yes. How are you, Steve?
Hi, fine. Listen, one of the things, the reason we love having you on the show and people that follow the website, War Room Pandemic, one of the reasons they love it is that we try to get down, we try to focus the signal and the noise. We try to get the noise out and focus on the signal. What is the most important things that are happening now in this pandemic? Obviously, there's a global sell-off this morning as we start global markets throughout the world, now realizing that maybe some of the information they've been getting is not actually totally correct. We do know that, and I know this from people that are experts in China, on the ground in China, not people that are you're seeing on cable TV. They're just spinning the same type of spin that essentially much of China by the CCP, which canceled this very important meeting that was coming up in March. They've never done that before. This is unheard of. It's essentially they're in DEFCON 1, and what I mean by that, they're in a grid system. This is as close as the CCP comes to basically making sure there's not any type of insurrection or making sure there's not any type of popular uprising. They're doing this in the quarantine and lockdown mode throughout the country. This grid system is very, very tight. People don't have the ability to kind of move around the country as easily as they have. In other sections of the country, they're trying to open it up. So, Professor Balding, you're an expert on actually looking at the physical. You have these indices you've set up, and you've really looked at the physical nature of the Chinese economy, the way things move around. Can you give us your current assessment of actually what's going on in the ground in mainland China?
Well, basically, there's not a whole lot going on in mainland China. We've seen in the past, let's say, week, a little bit of a little increase in activity. And when I say a little bit of increase in activity, most people, after they return to their hometowns prior to Chinese New Year, and there's been no indication that they have, for instance, returned to the homes where they work and have jobs at. And so there's, even if the economy wants to get going, people aren't back where their jobs are. There's ships that are bobbing all up and down the eastern seaboard of China that are being backed up. They simply can't unload. This is causing problems. Inventories in a lot of industries are at either all-time highs or very close to all-time highs, because the larger heavy industries that can't shut down, that continue to run throughout Chinese New Year, specifically like metals types of activities, They continued producing at relatively normal levels, expecting this to be a short-lived issue. Well, now that hasn't happened, and so now they have these enormous inventory overhangs. And so even if China returns to work within the next week or two, which the Chinese government is urging people to start working again, there's going to be these large overhangs because we've now been roughly 1 month where China has been shut down, and roughly the way things normally work on a seasonal basis, China would have returned to essentially full normal operation around, let's say, 2 weeks ago, February 10th, maybe February 8th or so, where they would have been at a completely normal working level. And they've been shut down for essentially a month now. So even if they return to work very quickly, it's probably going to be another, let's say, 10 days before that happens, and that's going to cause significant disruptions to supply chains, and you're already starting to see that happen.
Okay, let me unpack that for a second. So when you say they've been shut down for a month, just walk me through. When you say shutdown, this is like Dr. Hatfield says, it's just got to run its course, right? It's these phrases that I think get people rattled, right? I said, what do you mean by run its course? Oh, when 1 billion people are infected. I go, okay, that's not, more. When you say shut down, let's just go back as a baseline. When you say shut down, describe to the audience, what does that mean?
So just to give you a simple comparison, coal consumption in China is probably running about 50% of normal levels at this time, 1 month after Chinese New Year. Because the Chinese economy is very seasonal, and so there's this Chinese New Year, and then it takes 10 days to 2 weeks to ramp back up, and then it's running at relatively accelerated levels before it enters the summer building season. So at this point, for coal consumption levels, and I use coal consumption as a simple example, because China is a very coal-dependent economy. Nearly, let's say, roughly 70% of electricity and power is generated with coal in China. So at this point, for the Chinese economy to be running coal consumption levels that are roughly 50% of what they are 1 month after Chinese New Year is an enormous, enormous difference, just telling you that there's not a lot of businesses running in China, and this level has been basically flat since Chinese New Year. So this is 1 month of a pretty consistent level that this is happening, basically telling us businesses haven't been operating, and they're not operating now.
What other things physically do you check besides coal consumption? What else, when you look at this, to say this economy is essentially flatlined, at least for the last month? What other indices do you look at as leading indicators that things are happening?
So I'll give you 2 other examples. We have very regular data on real estate sales, and that's everything from land sales, because local governments in China get large amounts of revenue from land sales. And so if we don't see land being sold, that means governments in China aren't getting money, and that's a real problem. We have not seen land sales. We also have very regular data on how many apartments are being sold in China on an almost daily basis. And basically, in all of China, there's almost no apartments being sold. There's very, very few apartments. In some major cities, recently, you've literally had 5 and 10. And so you think of a city of 20 million people, and there's 5 units that are sold in a day. That basically tells us that there's essentially nothing happening. And for an economy that is dependent on real estate as China is, that's a major, major problem. We also have
no, go ahead.
We also have daily traffic data on all kinds of movement, whether it's people taking train trips back to their places of residence, or whether it's just daily commuting traffic. And basically, what we see is that there just is very little transportation taking place, whether it's cars, whether it's people and trains. There just is very low levels of transportation. probably about 20, let's say 15 to 25% of what we would consider yearly norms, and that's just telling us that there's just no transportation taking place. So people aren't moving, goods aren't moving. China is just basically flatlining as an economy.
Okay, this is what I want to get into for a second. Jack, jump in here, but let me just pursue this. Okay, this is my point about, and we're hearing reports from people on the ground and people that are close China watchers like yourself, that they've implemented this grid system to basically make sure that there's almost no movement even within cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and other places, obviously Wuhan and Central. But that one of the best indicators you've got is that your point is 15 to 20% of what's normal. That's an 80% drop to an 85% drop. That literally throughout China, at least right now, it is, if not in total lockdown, you have, very restrictive travel, and so you're not having the communications of people going back and forth, and particularly goods and services not going back and forth. Is that the way you read it, Professor Balding?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. Even in many cities, a lot of these, as you said, the grid system, a lot of these apartment buildings basically give out 3 passes per housing unit that can actually take this ticket and essentially leave the apartment complex to go buy groceries. Some of them, depending on the city, you actually have one ticket that allows one person in that household to leave the apartment complex every 2 days. It depends on different cities and things like that. And so in some of these cases, you have people that have not been outside in, a week or 2 weeks or something like that. And in fact,
that's the proverbial e-ticket. That's a proverbial Disney e-ticket. You get the e-ticket to actually go. But Professor Balding, I want to go back to something. President Xi had this nationwide video that went out to talk to everybody. Of course, naturally, you don't see him going to Wuhan. You don't see him going to Hubei. Jack Maxey brought this up over the weekend. The buried lead, and I want to get your responses. The buried lead in his talk to the nation, which part of it was, hey, we got to get the economy back going. People are going to be going back to work in certain areas, kind of giving the rah-rah speech that, hey, we're in charge. This is going to be fine. But for the good of the country, you need to do this. And he had a phrase in there. The farmers, we need the farmers to go back to work to plant the spring crop.
His quote is, "We must promptly solve the outstanding problems that affect spring plowing and organize production, circulation, and supply of materials to ensure production does not miss the farming time."
Okay, this is, as you know, and this gets back to the Hubei about the market, although it didn't come from the market, about they like eating the exotic animals. One of the things in China that the specter that has haunted China for millennia is famine. This is one of the big things, one of the biggest things that Mao tried to solve for and made it worse in the Great Famine in the 1950s, right? We collectivized the farms to try to make it more productive. There is nothing that triggers the Chinese people more than the potential for famine, okay? This is the phrase he just read, that what is she signaling here? Are they actually now concerned, do you believe, because of the virus and because of the grid system and the lockdown of transportation? Do you believe that the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP at the high command, is actually deeply concerned about the ability to plant the spring crop?
I do think they are, and I think it actually even goes further than what you're talking about. Just to give you an idea, food inflation in China is actually up significantly. And even though we talk about China as this very developed economy and things like that, in reality, let's say 45% of the economy still lives on an income of about $200 a month. And for many people, let's say a third of their income will go to paying for food. And so if you say that food inflation is 10%, and pork inflation is 100% over the past year, that is a major, major concern. And it's not just the coronavirus right now. It's the African swine flu that has reduced pig stock by 60%. It is the army worm, which decimated a lot of crops last year. So it's an accumulation of these things. And when he talks about them being worried about making sure that they get the crops planted so that they can feed themselves, that is absolutely a fundamental concern, because inflation, and specifically food inflation, is one of the biggest concerns ever in the CCP, dating back many, many years.
Professor Balding, jump in
Yeah,
here.
Professor, I just wanted to ask you a question. One of our listeners asked us this. I mean, as we watch the supply chain sort of collapse in China, things are not leaving the ports. Two questions. What do you think are the critical supplies, not the medical things, but say, sheetrock, whatever.
The supply chains.
It's going to come to the U.S. Where are we going to start seeing failure to deliver that might start slowing down some of our industries?
I think the places that you're likely to start seeing it quickest is in a lot of the basic building materials, furnitures, things like that. Because just as a simple example, with U.S. housing starts being up and the housing market being very robust, that's the type of thing that could really start throwing kinks into that, where other markets like Mexico or other places like that just don't necessarily have the capacity. Because one of the things China does have is whether it's various types of fabricated steel, building materials like sheetrock, other things like that.
Like nails. I mean, the basics of.
Exactly.
I mean, the shelves at Home Depot aren't much different than the pharmacies, right?
Exactly, that's correct. So, Home Depot is a great example. A lot of those basic inputs that they can do in bulk there. And again, one of the things to keep in mind is a lot of those manufacturers are mid-sized manufacturers in China that operate on very, very low single-digit margins. And so if this is the type of thing they're talking in China about, this putting a lot of people out of business, and if they don't start shipping soon, this is going to cause real problems for them, and it's going to start hitting places like Home Depot and people's ability to build.
Okay, we've got to jump. I got one more question, because we're going to have you back on the show later in the week. What are the things that you're looking for to show that the movement of goods around China, the movement of people back to the factories? What are the two or three things you're looking closely at to see if this thing starts to turn back around?
Basically, so China in the past couple of days has started to really talk about how they've almost conquered. They haven't declared mission accomplished, but they've been talking for a couple of days now about how the coronavirus cases are going down. Nobody believes that, but Beijing seems to be betting that a lot of sick people with a functioning economy is better than a non-functioning economy with a lot of sick people. And so they seem to be urging people back to work. The big question is going to be, do Chinese people believe their government and actually go back to work? And right now, what we aren't seeing is Chinese people believing their government and going back to work. So regardless of what the government says, the question is going to be, do people go back to work?
Last question. How big a deal was it, the moving of this party meeting that's never been moved before, to as a signal to the Chinese people that the regime may actually not be in control here? How big psychologically is that?
They're definitely trying to sell it as they're watching out for the people and they're responsive to the people. I think one of the things that is so apparent, however, is that there is just incredibly poor planning. Nobody seems to know what's going on. Just today, Wuhan announced that they were actually going to release the travel embargo into and out of Wuhan, and then literally like an hour later, they said, nope, we didn't mean that. The travel embargo is still on. And so one of the things is that nobody really seems to know what's going on, and things change daily. It's different city to city. And so they're trying to sell it as we care about the people. I think a lot of people are reading it much more as there's just generalized confusion.
Professor Christopher Balding, thank you very much. Calling in from Saigon Fulbright University, an expert in the microeconomics of the Chinese economy. Thank you very much, Professor Balding, for joining us. Now I want to turn to Italy. We have Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins on, who's one of the leading journalists in Italy. Maria Luisa, can you hear us?
Good morning. Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
the people have been shocked today to get up this morning and to read all this, what's happening in Italy. And it appears like it happened virtually from Thursday or Friday. Can you give us an update? What exactly is going on in Italy regarding this pandemic?
Well, the situation is grave to the extent to which the regions of Lombardy, Veneto, Piedmont, Emilia-Romagna, and Liguria, we're talking about northern Italy, is shut down from the rest of the country, pretty much. Schools in Lombardy are shut down. All religious functions are off. Museums, cinemas, theaters are closed. Fashion Week is operating on closed doors. They're thinking about closing stores. Milan is a ghost town, and we're talking about Lombardy alone. The Carnevale of Venice closed. Schools, museums will be shut down in the whole region of Veneto until March 1st. Same thing in Piedmont and Emilia-Romagna and Trentino. We're talking about 55% of Italy's GDP is produced in these 5 regions. 11 townships are quarantined. We're talking about 11 townships around the city of Milan, shut down from the rest of the country. The governor of Lombardy right now, Mr. Fontana, is speaking to the country right now, talking about 172 people that have been affected by the coronavirus only in the region of Lombardy. We have 230 cases and 6 people dead.
Maria Luisa, we've got to jump to a commercial break. Could you please hold on? We want to hold you. I've got more questions about Italy when we return. Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins, one of the top reporters from Italy, will be joining us from Rome when we return on War Room Pandemic. We told you several weeks ago that this was going to happen, and now it is upon us in South Korea, in Iran, in Italy, in China. We're going to return with Curtis Ellis, Jack Maxey, Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins, Stephen K. Bannon. We'll be back in a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Live from the nation's capital, it's episode 23 of War Room Pandemic on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcasting throughout the country, on America's Voice.news, the platform, the streaming platform for the Trump movement, on FM 99.1 and FM 103.9 in Chicago and the Chicago suburbs. We want to welcome you back. We have Curtis Ellis. Greg Manns is now joining us from the War Room with updates. Jack Maxey on pandemic. I want to read a tweet that person sent out to our team on War Room 2020. I sold all my stocks on Friday because I listened to War Room Pandemic. Thank you guys very much. I'll buy when it's cheaper. And the reason is that we don't want people to sell their stocks. What we want people to do is get real information. They can make their own decisions. We're now joined on the phone by Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins. She's one of the lead reporters and TV personalities on Mediaset, which is Berlusconi's major news network in Italy, one of Italy's finest reporters and probably one of the finest reporters, I think, in all of Europe. Maria Luisa, you said something that was quite disturbing. It's about Fashion Week. Italy is the center. France and Italy are the center of world fashion, and Italy, particularly northern Italy. The Giorgio Armani show during Fashion Week, I think, was shut down. Is Fashion Week totally shut down, or is it just closed? Is just closed for only limited attendance?
Well, they're operating on closed doors, which means that they're actually having the show. They're showing their clothes, but there's no public allowed, which means that the buyers are going to be less than usual, which means that there is going to be economic ramifications for Fashion Week and definitely for Italy throughout this week. We're talking about all religious functions as well being suspended. The Vatican just said, and I'm reporting this, delayed all religious functions, not only in the city of Rome, but throughout Italy. We're talking religious functions for Catholic countries. So we're talking Fashion Week, we're talking Carnival, we're talking religious functions, we're talking movies, cinemas, theaters. All operations are shut down. We're talking about the major universities in Italy, which are the universities of Milan, Turin, all the Veneto regions. They will not be allowed until classes are closed until March 1st to the least. So we don't know where this is going, and the country is operating under a state of emergency, which is something that should have never been allowed to happen. We knew about the coronavirus way before the crisis erupted, and now we're operating under emergency.
Is it Renzi? Didn't he say that this is not that big a deal? I think one of the quotes from the from one of the leaders in the country was that this was not a big deal. But is it Lombardy under quarantine right now? Is there 50,000 or 80,000 people in the Lombardy area, which is, as you said, northern Italy? I think this area is 55% of the entire Italian company. Are you actually in quarantine in certain parts of the countries, not just things closed down, but actually under quarantine?
11 townships are quarantined. We're talking about the most industrial, the epicenter of the industrial operations in Lombardy. As you know, Milan is a city of fashion, is a city of museums, is a city of cinemas, it's a city of art. But the 11 townships that operate and that produce around the city of Milan, yes, are in quarantine, which means lockdown. They don't go in, people don't come in, people don't go out, and their worry right now is that the food distribution and the healthcare providers won't be able to make it if people do need help. So it's a situation that is very, very complicated for the most productive sector part of Italy. You said 55% of the GDP. Exactly. It is produced in these 5 regions. 46% of the population, the Italian population, resides in these 5 regions that are affected by this, by the situation.
Maria Luisa, can you tell us about, there's some confusion about train travel throughout the country, and particularly between Austria and Italy and Switzerland and Italy. Part of the EU was a free flow of people and goods, and Salvini and the guys on the right have been attacked about this whole thing about locking down the country. Can you just get us, what is the latest of what's happening between Italy, Austria, Italy, Switzerland, and the great train system you have in Italy that transport people throughout the nation?
Last night, a train that was operating from Venice to Munich going through the Brenner Pass in Austria was suspended. The operation was suspended. And today, Austria said that they will not accept trains coming in from Italy. Same thing is happening between Italy and Romania. So Romania pretty much shut down the frontiers, the borders with Italy. France is contemplating doing the same thing. A bus was stopped from, I believe, Turin to Lyon because a person was suspected to have been affected by the coronavirus. Switzerland is doing the same thing, contemplating suspending operations. But what is most alarming right now is that the operations are the trains between Rome and Milan. We are discussing the most productive area of northern Italy and the center. The capital of Italy, Rome, have been delayed because of possible contagion cases on the Frecciarossa trains, which is the fast trains between Rome and Milan. So there are problems at the border. There are problems in between Italy, and a number of regional trains, which are the bread and butter of the Italian transportation system, are being delayed and stopped at several stations right now.
Maria Luisa, last question. How are people in Italy getting information? There was somebody on Maria Bartiromo today, or the other day, that was very dismissive of Christopher Whitten. It was actually this morning saying, "Oh, Italy's public health system is one of the best in the world. This is not going to be a problem. It'll blow over in a couple of days." Number one, what is the status of the public health system? Number two, how are Italian citizens in country getting accurate and timely information now?
Well, the Italian health system is a public system, and it is a good system, especially in the regions of the north. One of the things that the northern governors are saying is we are actually testing more people than any other country in Europe. Now, whether the European system as a whole failed, Steve, that's a different story, because this is exactly what happened. There is no common protocol between the EU countries, and Italy is going with this solo, with its own method and its own protocol and its own system. The healthcare system in northern Italy is a very good and strong one, and people are trusting that the situation can be held under control. However, the information that was being delivered at the beginning of this crisis was not sufficient, was not enough. People dismissed it. They shut down direct flights between Wuhan and Rome, but they did not shut down flights that had layovers. So the virus spread in an enormous fashion without anybody controlling the diffusion of the virus. So we have two situations right now. We have the healthcare system, which is a regional system, which is under stress, and we have a public information network that is operating at a national level and not cooperating with the European Union and the European system. So this is what is creating confusion among Italians. In an interdependent European asset, we should have a more coordinated effort. But right now, what we're seeing is that each nation in the European Union is pretty much going on their own with this.
Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins from Mediaset, live from Rome. Thank you very much for joining us today on War Room Pandemic. Look forward to having you back on the show later in the week. A situation in Italy that now is, headed directionally not good, right? And this is what we've been telling people. You've got to get ahead of this. We had, Gordon from the New England Center of Complex Studies on the second show 4 weeks ago, and he said in complex systems you have to take dramatic actions early on to make sure you don't have to have draconian measures later. And what you have seen consistently is people failing to get ahead of this, right? And now you've got misinformation, and now you got a situation like in Italy, a situation like in Iran, a situation like in South Korea. South Korea, we understand that the army base now near the this church where there's 50 or 60 people that are infected, that there may have been some parishioners from the army base, and the army base is actually talking about quarantining. So we're going to get more into that. We want to bring in now Dave Bratt, and I want to get Curtis Ellis into this. Dave Bratt was a congressman from Virginia 7. He's also a renowned economist and also the head of the business school at Liberty University. I know, Dave, that this has been one of your big issues about this supply chain. We had Professor Balding on at first from China, or from Saigon, who studies the movements of the Chinese economy. He said, hey, they're in essentially still lockdown right now. Very little flow of goods, materials, or people between cities, and this is going to start to have a big ramification eventually into the world economy, including the United States, because the supply chain, basically the railhead of that, is now, because of globalization, in China.
Yeah. I just want to make two major points. One is it's an embarrassment that all of our, Harvard MBAs and all these elite folks who study theory, they should know better. The first thing we teach at Liberty in Finance 101 is diversification. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. We have 85% of the active ingredients of pharmaceuticals being made in China. What can be worse than giving a monopoly to a communist regime, right? What could go wrong? And so second, going off what I just heard from your last conversation, what you have to do is you have to take extraordinary measures up front in the economic realm as well. And so our Nobel laureates, we've had Nobel laureates we have Jim Buchanan out of Virginia, Doug North won a Nobel for work on institutions and property rights. And there's work on tragedy of the commons. And what that all means is you've got to have some rule of law or international norms, and if you all don't hang together, right, as individual firms, which we believe in, liberty and individual action and all that, if you don't hang together as individual firms, you'll all hang separately, because right now China is leading us toward their communist system of rules and norms. They have their social score. They're keeping track of U.S. firms. Everybody knows our markets are mature, right? So our folks make $50,000 a year. Their folks make $9,000 a year. They have a $14 trillion economy. If you bring their folks up to making $50,000 a year, which eventually they'll get to, that puts them at a $150 trillion economy compared to our $20 trillion. Now, I don't think that's going to happen, and some experts out there are calling this a black swan, and that's a little irritating because China, Japan was supposed to overtake us, Russia was going to overtake us, China's going to they're going to fall apart for this reason right here, the lack of transparency, the lack of the rule of law, the closure and the domination of their own people's freedom, the crushing of their spirit.
Congressman Bratt, take a second. I want you to explain to our audience, we've got a big deplorable audience. What is a black swan? You hear a lot of people now in markets throughout the world saying this may be the black swan moment for China and for globalization. What do you mean describe what you mean by a black swan?
Yeah, it's all right to use the term. I know what people mean. It's a 1 in a million, incalculable, unpredictable event that occurs that changes the rules of the game, et cetera. So in one sense, you can see that. But in another sense, if you've studied free markets for 30 years, controlled command communist totalitarian regimes do not work over the long run. So it's not. This was entirely predictable. I don't think it is a black swan, in the sense that when you're doing virus research in Wuhan, which they're doing, and they won't let the WHO in or the U.S. Agencies in to study it, that's an indicator, right? And this has implications for our friends around the globe, countries around the globe. China's going around with their Belt and Road strategy of buying off countries and buying off United Nations votes. And I hope folks around the globe now will take a look at their partner, China. Right?
So what you're saying,
airline,
Congressman, this is not a black swan. This is chickens coming home to roost.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. It's the logic of communism. It will happen. You may not be able to predict the year. They can print money, they can go into debt, they can subsidize industry, but you can only do that for a decade or two, right? You cannot continually ignore the price system or you will fail. And that happens every time. It's highly predictable. And so, Reagan knew that. He held to his guns and he broke them. Trump is just unique for the past 30 years of someone who sees it and gets it. And it's degenerated into this free market argument. It's not really a free market argument. It's China doesn't even know what freedom is.
No, it's mercantilism versus we've been played as
Right.
suckers. Let me before I let you go, President Trump. You just heard, you were on and heard Maria Louisa Rossi Hawkins say how Lombardy is now in quarantine. It's 55% of the Italian economy that is not essentially moving. What immediate lessons, do you think the Trump administration ought to take from the situation in China, and what corrective actions can we take immediately? Not some theoretical could happen over a couple of years, but President Trump is an action-oriented, and he believes in Trump time, right, which is like double time. What would you, if you were there today, what would you be telling the president?
It's very simple. I call it the golden rule of reciprocity. Anything the Chinese want from us, we have to demand from them. If they want to send students here, we get to send students there. If they want in on our New York Stock Exchange, we get to go in on any of their exchanges. If they want to be in our index funds, we get to be in their index funds. If they want to use our technology, they have to live up to global norms. And all this has to happen tomorrow. It's just embarrassing how we've been codependent with China, and we've allowed them under the hopes that once they got rich, they'd turn out. They're not. They have their documents, China 2025. You covered all that, so people know. They're at war with us economically. It's going to be a cyber war, economic war next, probably not a kinetic war. And that's what they're doing. And we're going along with it. It's unbelievable. So the golden rule of reciprocity, that's it.
Congressman Brad, how do people get more, I know it's your Liberty now, how do people get more access to your writings? What's your Twitter handle? What's that?
Yep, well, we're setting up the Falkirk Center at Liberty, committed to faith and freedom, which are the institutions that made this country great, which is the polar opposite of Bernie and of the Soviet Union and now of China, which are all failing. And so come take a look at Liberty, the Falkirk Center, Faith and Freedom, and we're getting global experts. Young people are messaging on this stuff, trying to spread the word that socialism isn't cool, it kills people. And you've been the leader on this for a long time, so we really thank you for your work, Steve.
Congressman Brad, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it on War Room Pandemic. I want to turn to Jack Maxey and then to Curtis Ellis. We've got a couple of minutes here. What's the hottest news coming off this today?
Well, I think one of the things that's very interesting is this looks like it's spreading in the Middle East. We've got a case in Oman now. We also have 13 in the UAE, 1 in Lebanon, 1 in Egypt. Bahrain has announced that they have a student that came back from Iran who also has it. And we have our first case in Iraq. These are very important countries to watch because they are both have very poor health systems, and also they are perfect environment for the virus itself. Very dry climate, dense populations.
They canceled the big meeting with the Chinese Communist Party, but tell us what's going on in South Korea. Has the assembly met?
Well, very interesting. The South Korean assembly has postponed any new meetings. Apparently, somebody was at one of the assemblies a week ago who is now tested positive for the coronavirus, so there's some concern that the legislature may have been exposed as well. One thing that I think is really important for us to think about here and where we're screwing up as a country, the CDC. The CDC announced as of Friday that they had tested 412 people. Today, it's a little bit over 500, and this is because our tests are not good.
We're going to drill down this one tomorrow. There's something not right here, but Italy has thousands of tests. There's other
South
countries-
Korea is testing over 1,000
over
people
1,000
a day.
people. There's something wrong with that number. We're going to drill down on that. And listen, the reason we did this show is to make sure that there's a clearinghouse for as much good information as possible. And by the way, we're not saying this came out of the Wuhan lab. Media, all the media guys, that Media Matters and all these guys are not listening to the show. We're trying to put out both sides of this because it's not 100% definite about where this started from. So War Room Pandemic is where you go to get all the information. I'm announcing now that we're going to start going 7 days a week. As of today, we'll be on this weekend on Saturday and Sunday. There's more announcements about distribution of the show. I want to go to Curtis Ellis, brother.
The takeaway from what we heard today is the fundamentals of globalism. Let's look at the macro picture. The fundamentals are the international specialization of labor and the free movement of people, goods, and capital. And that's exactly what the coronavirus is exposing, the fallacies in both of these systems. We decided we would do all the manufacturing in China. We can build houses in America. We'll get the workers from Mexico, and we'll get the nails from China. But now we're seeing we can't get the nails from China. A generation ago, we made the nails in Missouri that built the houses in St. Louis, right? But somebody decided there was a better way to do things.
Professor Buchanan, we'll get into more on this in the week. I'm announcing we're doing a special with Curtis Ellis that'll be up. We're going to shoot a special after the show here. I got so much I want to go through with Curtis and Jack, so we're going to have a special edition up besides this regular edition. Professor Buchanan was at Virginia Tech when I was there back in the 70s. The tragedy of the commons, one of the things we're going to find out now is, and you wrote the great piece, the China price has come at a huge cost. The China price is this concept of mass globalization where the cheapest price goes everywhere. These are these morons, these economists and these business people. And by the way, Dave Brad, thank you. I'm a Harvard MBA. I took the shot right at the beginning. That they all know money. They know the price of everything. They know the value of nothing. The tragedy of the commons now is that you have not looked into the whole issue of national security, and particularly health security is national security. So you have this free transmission of everything. But guess what? It also can transmit, your public health in Atlanta, Georgia, or your public health in Washington, D.C., or in Raleigh, North Carolina, or in Kansas City, Missouri, is directly tied for the public health in Wuhan. Right? And no American citizens kind of made that bet. They said, well, hey, nobody told me that. Well, listen, this is the reality. This is why we're doing this show. It's upon everybody to get up to speed on this. You're going to have to spend some time. You're going to have to go to sites. You're going to have to start reading the news. Remember, you may not have an interest in the virus, but the virus has an interest in you. So it's time to get savvy on this thing and get focused. This is War Room Pandemic. This is what episode are we on? 23?
23.
Okay, we're going to be up. This will be up as the podcast, over 2.8 million downloads. And the hottest show around, I guess, except for War Room 2020. I want to thank Curtis Ellis. I also want to thank Dave Bratt, Maria Luisa Rossi Hawkins from calling in from Italy. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock.